Howdy friends, Brian Flechsig of Mad River Outfitters in the Midwest Fly Fishing Schools, and welcome back to another episode in our series on getting started in fly fishing. In our last episode, we left off at number 3, the fly line system. And you remember back, we had 3 parts to that. We had the backing, which we talked about. We had the fly line, which we've talked about. Now today, we're going to talk about the leader. I cannot stress this enough, friends. This is probably the single most important component, the most important episode that you can watch in this series. It's amazing to me how many people don't understand the basics of leaders, and we're going to cover that today. The way to put it is, if your leader's not right, nothing else go moving backwards. If your leader sucks, so does your line, so does your rod, so does your reel, so do your waders. Everything is ruined if you don't have the right leader. And it's really pretty simple. So let's break this down. And also, there's going to be plenty more on this. But here in this series, I want to get you the basics to where you can get the proper leader on there and get out and get fishing, okay? We'll do a whole series on that we'll call knots and leaders. We'll get kind of into some advanced stuff. I actually have a book coming out that we'll promote here called The End of the Line, and it's probably the most boring book ever written on fly fishing. It's a book about leaders, but I think it's going to be a pretty important one. So let's take a look at this real quick. The leader, by definition, is the connection between your fly line and your fly, usually made out of monofilament, good old fishing line. But a leader, I want you to think of it this way. A leader is a mathematical equation. The word leader equals a butt plus tippet. Okay? You have a tapered butt section, and it has to be tapered. And this is where it's going to attach to your fly line. And then you have the last diameter of your leader is what we call the tippet, okay? Now, this butt section has to be tapered. Just like your arm is tapered, your rod's tapered. You found out last time that the fly line is tapered, and your leader continues that taper. And the tippet is the last diameter of the leader. It's the business end to where you're going to attach the fly, okay? So when you see a leader package and it says leader, it contains a butt section and a tippet. Usually no knot, it's just extruded there, but the last, say, 2 foot or so of this leader will be tippet. You're ready to tie on a fly and go. Now, once you've got one fly caught in a tree, another fly caught in a tree, you change a fly because that one's not working, then you're going to have some tippet. And this is just single diameter monofilament, and you're going to attach tippet to make that leader whole again using a real simple surgeon's knot or a blood knot, which you can find tutorials, of course, here on our YouTube channel. So by definition, the word leader equals a tapered butt section plus a tippet. It's all in the package and ready to go. So let's take a look at 2 variables that you need to understand, okay? And the first is the length of the leader. As a general rule, and you can use this rule throughout your entire fly fishing career, keep your leader approximately the same length as your fly rod. End of story. It's easy to remember. And this way too, you've always got a measuring stick in your hand, okay? Keep your leader approximately the same length as your fly rod, and you're going to be in good shape. Now, of course, there's exceptions to that rule. There's times you may want to go shorter, times you may want to go longer, but don't worry about that for now. You're just getting started. You're just wanting to get out there on the water. Keep your leader approximately the same length as your fly rod. And so therefore, most of your leaders, and the #1 selling length of leader here in the shop and around the world, are 9-foot leaders, okay? If you remember back, I recommended an 8.5 to a 9-foot fly rod. I recommend a 7.5 to a 9-foot leader, with 9-foot being the best selling. So approximately, again, approximately 7 foot of that is going to be tapered butt section, and approximately 2 foot of that is tippet. It's not an exact science. Some leaders are going to be different than others, but this is a good way to think of it. 7 foot is tapered butt section, approximately 2 foot is tippet. Again, once you cut it back, and your leader is now 7.5 foot long, you know this because you've got a measuring stick in your hand, that's your rod. You're going to pull off some tippet, and you're going to tie enough tippet on to make that leader approximately 9 foot again, and you're back in good shape. Okay? So the next variable that you'll see on the leader package is it's going to tell you 4x. Right there it tells you how long it is. Right here it tells you 4x. And what that x is, it's referring to the diameter of the tippet. Okay? And bear with me, and I'm sure that we'll have this somewhere down below in the comments or what have you. But 0x equals 11 thousandths diameter. And you don't need to memorize this, but just bear with me. 1x equals 10 thousandths. 2x equals 9 thousandths. 8 thousandths. I'm sure you see the pattern going on here, but best just to let him finish, Clark. Well, look at that. Okay, so the moral of this story is 0x is thick, 6x is thin. The higher the number, the thinner the diameter of the tippet. Okay, let me say that again. The higher the number, the thinner the diameter. The lower the number, the thicker the diameter. It's the same with fly hooks. Okay, the higher the number, the smaller the hook. The lower number, the bigger the hook. So now that you know that, you can forget about this. Nobody wants to think in terms of thousandths of an inch. Okay, 6x is thin, 0x is thick. So what does this mean? Here it is. To determine what size tippet you should be using, it really has to do with primarily the size, weight, and wind resistance of the fly that you're trying to cast. Secondarily, it may have a little bit to do with the fish you're fishing for. For example, if it's a big heavy fish, you're going to need heavy tippet, or you might need wire or such. And then last but not least, the presentation, whether it's a nice soft dry fly presentation or a streamer presentation. But the first task at hand is you have to be able to deliver the fly. So therefore you must have the right tippet, and that tippet must be matched to the size of the fly. So here it is. This is a pretty good way to do this. Take the size of the fly. Let's say it's a size 12 fly, okay? And trust me, you'll get good at this over time. You'll be able to look at a fly and tell the size. Maybe start keeping track of when you buy the flies, what size they are. And then you can also get yourself this little hook gauge. We sell them here at the shop, but this hook gauge, and you can lay the hook right alongside it, and it's going to tell you what size your hook is. You can carry that in your kit or your vest or your bag. So you figure out what size fly you have. Let's say it's a size 12. Divide by 3 or 4, and that tells you that a size 12 fly requires 3x or 4x tippet. Okay? A size 6 fly, divide by 3 or 4. A size 6 fly requires 1x or 2x tippet. Okay? Now, why do we do it by two numbers? Well, for example, a size 12 fly could be a really light dry fly that's designed to float. I would err on the thinner side of the tippet, the 4x. But what if that size 12 fly is a heavy weighted nymph with, say, a bead head or such on it? I would want to err on the heavier tippet, or the 3X, okay? So let's make sure that you understand this. If I took a really heavy fly, let's say I took a size 6 fly, and I didn't understand this basic math rule here, and I tried to tie it on to 6X tippet, your casting is going to be horrendous. Superman couldn't make that cast. The energy is going to go through your arm, through the rod, through the fly line. It'll enter into the butt section of the leader, and then about halfway down that leader is just going to collapse. It's going to collapse in a big pile, and the cast won't straighten out and won't deliver properly for you. It's because that 6X tippet does not have the diameter required to carry the energy for that big fat fly. That makes sense? You've got to match your tippet to the size of the fly. Conversely, if I took a size 18 fly, little teeny tiny dry fly, and I tried to tie it on 0X tippet, okay? First of all, here's a clue. If the tippet won't even fit through the eye of the hook, you're probably mismatched, okay? But let's say you did get a size 18 fly tied on 0X. Here's what's going to happen. Bam! You're going to smack the water because too much energy made it to the fly. That tippet is too thick for that little fly. You needed to dissipate energy over thinner diameter tippet in order for that little teeny tiny fly to land lightly on the water. Okay? I'll tell you a quick little story, and then this was early in my career, in the early 90s. We had a customer here at Mad River Outfitters. He has since passed away, but he was a good friend and a great customer. And one day he came up to the counter with a stack of size 6 woolly buggers, and then he had a stack of 6X leaders. And I'm talking like 12 leaders. Now, remember that he could have just maybe bought 1 or 2 packs of the leaders and rebuilt his leader with tippet. So that was the first light bulb that went off in my head, that he didn't understand adding tippet. He just cut it back until it was too fat to fit through the eye, and then he would put on a fresh leader. But that wasn't the big concern. The big concern was, I said, Mr. H, if you don't mind me asking, are you fishing these big size 6 woolly buggers with this 6X leader? And he said, well, yes, Brian, I am. And I said, how's your casting? And he said, oh, I'm a horrible fly caster. I need to come and take some lessons with you. And I said, let me guess. It falls in a big pile on the water and you can never get the leader to straighten out. Oh, it's horrible. I said, and then you wind up overcompensating, pushing it harder, and it either kicks to the right or to the left. Or, I said, you ever hit yourself in the back of the head with the fly? It's a true story. He had on a Patagonia SST that I had sold him. He turns around and he puts the hood up, and there are hook marks in the back of the hood. This poor man was having to wear a hood to protect himself from errant woolly buggers flying through the air because they were attached to basically a wet piece of spaghetti. There was no way that that 6X could throw that big woolly bugger, and he's hitting himself in the back of the head. I suggested maybe he invest in a casting helmet at that point. The hood maybe wasn't even enough. So I said, Mr. H, I said, if you don't mind, can I make a suggestion? I went over to the wall and I swapped out his 6X leaders for 1X leaders, and he was appalled because he had been buying these leaders. And I asked him, I said, what led you to buy this 6X leader all this time? And he said, well, it's 2.5 pound test, and most of the fish I catch are under 2.5 pounds. So when I grabbed him the 1X leaders and it's like 16 pound test, he was appalled, thinking that he could like land a whale with this stuff. But the mistake he was making was he had no idea what 4X, 5X, 6X meant. He was buying the leader based on the pound test. And friends, pound test has nothing to do with fly fishing. or at least presenting a fly. Pound test just tells you when it's going to break. If you can't deliver the fly properly, why do you care what it's going to break? You're not getting the fly there in the first place, okay? So he was buying it based on the pound test. He had no idea what that X meant on there, and now you do. The X refers to the diameter of the tippet, and you must match the tippet to the size, weight, and wind resistance of the fly that you're trying to cast, okay? So two variables when it comes to leaders: the length, keep it approximately the same length as your fly rod, and keep approximately 2 foot of that in that ballpark of tippet at all times, and you'll be in good shape. Now you know that the X refers to the diameter, and that all has to do with the size, weight, and wind resistance of the fly you're trying to cast. We get people all the time that stand at the leader wall out there in the shop, and they get this glazed look in their eye, and they're really confused at what they're looking at. And then you come over and you say, "Hey, can I help you?" And they say, "Yeah, please. I'm going fishing this weekend on such and such river. We're fishing for trout. What size leader do I need?" I have no idea what size leader you need. "Okay, I'm going fishing with my brother-in-law. It's supposed to be sunny, 60 degrees. What size leader do I need?" You've given me no valuable information. "Okay, we're eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for lunch, and oh, here we go. I have a 5-weight fly rod. What size leader do I need for a 5-weight? Doesn't matter what you're having for lunch, and it doesn't matter what your rod is. I need to know what size fly you're trying to cast at that given moment." And then that customer says, "Oh, well, that's my next question. What flies do I need for fishing the river this weekend?" And without sounding flip or without sounding like a salesman, you need some big flies, you need some medium-sized flies, and you need some small flies. So now you need 2X, 4X, and 6X, for example, basically on any given day of fishing. Now, if you're a smallmouth angler or a largemouth angler, you can probably have just one diameter leader for the most part that you work with, because those are all relatively big flies. But if you're going after trout, you're going to have to throw some big flies, some little flies, some medium flies, and you're going to have to switch up your leader and your tippet from time to time. It's not rocket science. Again, keep your leader about as long as your fly rod. Match your tippet to the size, weight, and wind resistance of the fly you're trying to cast, and you'll be fine. So there you go, Leaders 101. I hope that makes sense. If anybody has any questions on this, feel free to chime in on the comments. Give me a call here at the shop. Shoot me an email here at the shop. We're always happy to answer your questions, but I know that this has helped you out a lot. So stay tuned. We've got a lot more coming in this Getting Started in Fly Fishing. Appreciate you watching. Stay tuned and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.